Thanks for checking out this week's message. If this is your church home, we hope that you'll lean in. And if this is your first time listening in, you've come at an incredible time. So let's go now to our pastor for today's message, Unrestrained.
Today is week 3 of 3 of a series that we're calling Unrestrained, pursuing a future of greater impact. And part of the freight being delivered in this unrestrained packaging is a proposed plan to do some much-needed building expansion. But that's really secondary. The building expansion is really secondary. What we're really talking about is the same thing we're always talking about, and that is matters of the heart. Right? And so on week 1, we talked about unrestrained generosity, as we found it modeled in the Hebrew people under Moses' leadership, Exodus chapter 35 and 36, unrestrained generosity. And on week 2, we talked about that same unrestrained generosity flowing from hearts of unrestrained gratitude. And we saw that demonstrated in Luke chapter 7, verses 36 and following, with the woman who crashed the dinner party and poured out her perfume on Jesus' feet. And today we're talking about all of that. Unrestrained generosity and unrestrained gratitude resulting in unrestrained mission. Unrestrained mission. Read this with me. It'll be up here on the screen. These are words from the Apostle Paul to the followers of Jesus in the ancient city of Corinth, found in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 9 in the New Testament. Let's read it aloud together. There is a wide open door for a great work here. When I read that recently, I thought, I can identify. I get that. There's a wide open door for a great work here. As I've attempted to piece the story together through the years, and this is a very shortened, condensed version of this story, but my understanding is that back in about 1980, so 43 years ago, I was 2 years old. Yeah, some of you believe that or don't believe that, but there was a small but passionate and visionary group of Jesus-loving people who came together with a big, audacious dream of planting a new, vibrant, evangelical, interdenominational church in the tiny rural town of Spring Hill, Kansas. And they did it. They did it. The dream became a reality, and Spring Hill Community Church was born. But of course, as we know, since the church is not a building, the church is a people, right? This group of people needed a place to meet, and their first meeting place was in the home of their pastor. Pretty soon they outgrew that, and they needed a place to meet, and so they acquired some land, 22 acres of land to be exact, that sat along the west side of 169 Highway, just north of Spring Hill. And on it was an old 2-story farmhouse. And that farmhouse became the church's primary meeting place. It became the church building. And I'm told that eventually they packed the place out. With scores of people crammed into that old house. And they had people sitting like on the stairs, going up the stairway, wherever they could find a place to sit. And I wasn't there, but reportedly those were exciting, thrilling days. I'm sure they were. Sadly, along the way, the church endured some difficulty, including some health issues of their founding pastor, and some things kind of began to lose momentum, as they sometimes do, and the future of their ministry became uncertain. However, across the years of their brief lifespan, this independent, interdenominational church had developed a little bit of a friendship with the denomination called the Church of the Nazarene. And so a little group of them actually went to the district superintendent of the Kansas City district, serves as the overseer of the regional area around the Kansas City area, and overseer of the congregations. And so went to the district superintendent that was at the time Dr. Milton Parrish. And they worked a deal. And this is I'm condensing the story down, but the deal basically ended up being this: they would be folded into the denomination as a new church, and the Kansas City district would appoint a pastor for them, and the fledgling congregation would deed over its land as the future site of a more permanent church building belonging to the Church of the Nazarene. And so in 1987, Pastor David Crawford, who had been serving in pastoral ministry previously in another place for 10 years, was now sensing the call of God on his life to serve on the foreign mission field. And so he, following the call of God, he resigned his church and uprooted his family and moved to Kansas City to complete his preparation and training at Nazarene Theological Seminary, because that's the way you used to have to do it. Now you just get online, wherever you might be in the world. But in that day, you had to uproot your family and move physically to Kansas City and attend seminary. Long story short, he was appointed pastor of the church formerly known as Spring Hill Community Church, now named Spring Hill Church of the Nazarene. And it was a good match. It was a good match. David was a great founding pastor for that church, and he and the people formed a tight bond, a great relationship. And during his 3-year tenure, the little handful of people became about 80 strong. And the sapling of a church with a future of greater impact was rooted in fertile soil. And somewhere along that storyline, the northern half of the property, 11 of the 22 acres, was sectioned off and sold along with the old farmhouse. And by the way, a dozen or 15 or so, I don't remember what year it was exactly, we ended up buying all that back, the 11 acres and the old farmhouse and all of it. We ended up buying it back. But in 1989, a brand new little 40 by 80 building was erected on the remaining 11 acres. I think we have a picture of the little country church that was built out here on the 11 acre plot of ground. And in May of 1990, Pastor David Crawford graduated from seminary, and he headed to France to do language study, hoping ultimately to serve in Haiti as a missionary, which he did, he and his family. And those days were very tumultuous in Haiti, and he was in Haiti and out of Haiti and in Haiti and out of Haiti, and finally it just became too much for their family, and ended up ultimately pastoring back here in the States. And at the same time, in 1990, a young, wet behind the ears, snotty-nosed kid also graduated from seminary. And there was a changing of the guard at Spring Hill Church of the Nazarene. The congregation reluctantly traded in their beloved 10-year veteran founding pastor for a total rookie. And the church formerly known as Spring Hill Community Church, and later formerly known as Spring Hill Church of the Nazarene, it's in 2003 that we changed the name to Grace Community Church of the Nazarene. At that time, 1990, the church began its downward spiral, its downward descent with the changing of the guard. Actually, that's not completely true by God's grace, even in spite of me. And yes, I know it's primarily because of Linda. I understand that. But in spite of me, the Lord helped us. And soon the little 40 by 80 building was bursting at the seams. So we had to expand. Just didn't have space for everybody. We had to expand. Our first building expansion project was when somebody donated a mobile home, a single-wide mobile home that had been partially burned and repaired. Yes, and but hey, the price was right. It was free, right? So take what you can get. Somebody donated a single-wide mobile home that had been burned and repaired, and they gave it to us, and we pulled it in out behind the building, and we used it for children's worship space, which we desperately needed. And you got to do what you got to do sometimes, right? And that's actually the real reason that we're proposing a new children's space. It's our way of apologizing to our children for the mobile home all those years, trying to make up for things. And then before long, we had to make a really strategic change. As we continued to grow, we couldn't really afford to build, and that wasn't the first best move anyway. But we couldn't afford to build, and so we added a second service in our little 40 by 80 building. And that probably doesn't sound like much of a thing, but believe me, it was a thing. It was a thing. It was. We've experienced a lot of changes through the years. It was the most difficult change we've ever made in our 36-year history as a church. And it was difficult. It was a difficult sociological change. Our little church was booming. And there was a buzz in the air, when we gathered, and the excitement was palpable as people crowded into that little space, and we were kind of the size, we were like bumping like 120 people or so in that little building, and we were kind of at the size where basically everybody knew everybody, and so we all felt really connected. And we all loved each other, and this change was going to mess with that, like all of that, the whole dynamic. And it got some pushback initially. Pushback like, this is going to break up our big happy family. But eventually, we worked through that, and mission triumphed over comfort. Please don't let those words sneak by you. Mission triumphed over comfort. And we did it. We added a second service. I'm pretty certain that if we had not done that, I think that's the most strategic change, the most strategic decision in terms of growth that this church has ever made. I'm pretty certain if we hadn't done that, we would have flattened out, and we would have allowed the size of the shoe to determine the size of the foot, and we would have remained a church of 100, 120, or whatever, probably for the rest of our history. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a good church of 100 or 150. We have tons of those in our denomination. Really good churches of 100 and 150. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that unless God has placed before you a wide open door and called you to a future of greater impact. Then choosing comfort over mission is probably a sin of selfishness for a congregation. And I don't say that lightly. And so we started a second service. And the only way the second service was going to thrive was if we had enough warm bodies in it initially to make it go. Yeah, you understand that, right? It just they call it critical mass. You just have to have enough warm bodies in the room to make it go, so you don't feel like you're all alone. And so I challenged our church board in those days to attend, get this, to attend both services for as long as it took for the new service to get its footing. And they did it. They did it, even though it meant hearing my same sermon twice every Sunday morning. Even the people who are paid to be here all morning don't even like to do that around here. So, but they did it. They volunteered. Eventually, that service did get its footing. Honestly, I'm so incredibly proud of those early Spring Hill Church of the Nazarene folks who gave and served and led in sacrificial ways to help make what we have now possible. There aren't very many of them left around here, sadly. Brad and Annette, I know you guys love to be in the spotlight. Would you just raise your hands right there? The Integrins right back there. Anybody else? Is Brenda back here? And the Crowders are back there. Norman, Kathy Crowders, Brenda Wise. So they're representing those early folks. But they gave and led and served in ways to make what we have now possible, which challenges us, guys. In all this conversation, can we not just think about the moment? Can we think about generations to come? And being the kind of people who the next generation will say, you know what, it is because of their love and service and sacrifice that we have what we have here today. So we went from one service to two. We used our space as creatively as we knew how. Eventually, in 1995, 96, it was time to build. You know, we'd done everything we could, and it was time to build. And that building project was a lot cheaper than what we're proposing now. It was a lot cheaper. For one thing, it was 30 years ago, you know, back when it didn't cost you $12 to go to McDonald's by yourself, you know. So things were just a lot less expensive, and you know, we were building less square footage, and we had a lot fewer people. So it was still a huge undertaking for us, and a huge step of faith. And it called for a very sacrificial spirit of choosing mission over comfort. I can still remember some of the miracle stories that came out of that whole experience. And I'll just share a couple of them with you this morning. We were scrimping and saving and doing way too much of the project ourselves. In fact, I ended up serving as the general contractor. So if the building falls in on your head, that's why. But it changed hands about 3 times till it landed in my lap, and I just thought, we can't hand this off to anybody else because we were trying to do it all ourselves. And so I ended up finishing out the building as the general contractor. And we were doing way too much of it ourselves, and I thought, if we ever build again, we will not do hardly anything ourselves. But there was a guy who showed up one Sunday. He just walked in cold off the street, and he happened to work in the construction industry, and so he's intrigued by what we were doing, and he ended up telling us, he said, one time a few years ago, I was driving up the highway by your church, and he said, I hit a deer out here on the highway in front of the church, and you guys you were so kind to me. He said, I just have appreciated it so much through these years that you went way out of your way to be helpful to me. And I'd like to return the favor. He said, I'm a commercial electrician. Is there any way I can help you on this project? I just want to warn you, be careful what you ask for. Be very careful what you ask for. He ended up donating all of his labor and actually doing the wiring on the entire construction project. I mean, he let some of us help pull wire and do that, but he was the brains of the operation. He donated all of his labor for free, saved us thousands and thousands of dollars. It was a serious God thing, and we desperately needed it to complete the project. And then, and I hate to even say this out loud, but as projects sometimes do, there was one point where we ran short of cash. It was only, as I recall, it was only about $50,000. I say only. If you want to give me only $50,000 this morning, go ahead. But it was only, in the grand scheme of things, it was only about $50,000. But at that time, it felt like $5 million. And I just remember I was in my office early one morning. It was a little corner office back in the back corner of the original building back there. Now, I was in there early one morning spending some quiet time with the Lord, begging him again, you got to help us. I just happened to be reading through the Old Testament book of Nehemiah, which is also about a building project. If you haven't read Nehemiah lately, there's a building project going on. And that morning, in the quietness of my study, I read these words, Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15. So the wall was completed in 52 days. And every once in a while, it doesn't happen every day, but every once in a while, the words just leap off the page. And that God just quickens the words on the printed page, and they become a living word. And when I read those words, I sensed the whisper of God's Spirit to my heart of hearts. And it doesn't happen to me every day. Maybe it does you. But every once in a while, I sense the whisper of God in a way that I just simply can't deny. I simply can't ignore without being disobedient to Him. And this time, the whisper, the prompting, whatever you want to call it, was just so strong, and it was just so clear, and I just couldn't shake it. I couldn't get away from it. And I felt like God whispered to my heart, I want you to ask the people to give this $50,000 in 52 days. And I was like, oh, God, seriously? I don't want to do that. These people have given so much, and they've sacrificed so much, and they've invested so much, not just money, but time and energy and effort, and I just don't want to ask them for anything more. You're God. Can't you just drop it out of the sky? This is easy. This is easy for you. But I couldn't shake it. I just couldn't shake it, and I finally said yes, and with fear and trembling, I went to the people on the following Sunday morning, and I just told them the story of what God had whispered to my heart. And guess what? We raised more than $50,000 in 52 days, and we completed the project. It happens to be the project that you're sitting in, by the way. And there were incredible stories of hugely sacrificial generosity that came out of that time. My very favorite story, and it's my favorite because it's not only the most inspiring, but it's also the most humbling, the most challenging story for me personally. I almost can't think about it without tearing up. It's the story of a single mom who was a part of our congregation at the time, and she was just scraping to survive. And unbeknownst to us, unbeknownst to me, I probably would have tried to talk her out of it, honestly. But unbeknownst to us, she heard the challenge. And she actually emptied her daughter's clothes out of an antique dresser that was in her daughter's bedroom and put her daughter's clothes in cardboard boxes on the floor so that she could sell the dresser to give a financial gift for the building project. And of course, we had absolutely no idea she was doing that. But gang, that is choosing mission over comfort at a whole new level. And by the way, as God would have it, a little bit later on, when she really, really desperately needed some reliable transportation, God heard her prayer. And someone in the congregation donated a good, solid, used car, and we got to actually sneak it over to her house when she was gone to work during the day, sneak it over into her garage and put a big red bow on it that said, "With love from Jesus." And that was cool. That was fun. Also, by the way, it was a really, really happy day when we finally completed this project. I mean, we were killing ourselves. I was working, I'm not complaining, just saying, I'm kind of complaining. We were like 100 hours a week. It was killer. It was brutal. And it was a really happy day when we got to move into this building and move the mobile home off of the property so people would quit asking me, "Is that where you guys live?" And this is my memento of that project. Just a little memento that I've held on to. You probably can't see it, but there are a couple little footprints impressed into this chunk of concrete. When they gave us the mobile home, we had to pour a little sidewalk out the side door back there to the mobile home, and I was standing there watching the work be done, and I was holding my oldest daughter in my arms, and her feet were about that long at that time. They said, "Hey, you want to put her footprints in here?" So when we tore out the sidewalk, I couldn't part with that chunk of concrete right there. So it's my reminder of the glory days, right? So why do I share all this with you? Well, to put it simply, we're doing it again. We're trying to pursue a future of greater impact, in part by expanding our facility. If you haven't noticed, some churches ought to be a church of 100, because they're in dead and dying communities, and everybody's closing up shop and moving away, and that's not our situation, folks. People just moving in by the truckloads. And so we're trying to pursue a future of greater impact, in part by expanding our facility. And the only way we can do it, the only way we can make it happen, is if we all choose mission over comfort and give with unrestrained generosity from hearts of unrestrained gratitude for the sake of unrestrained mission. And for some of you, this is the third time around. You've been here 3 weeks in a row, and you've heard this. But in case it's your first time, and this is the last time we'll do this for a while, but in case this is your first time in the last 3 weeks, let me tell you what we're thinking, okay? Let's put the floor plan up there really quickly. We'll show you this. So the orientation of this would mean the highway is that way. It's really that way, but we'll say it's that way. This is the front of the building. The blue section is a big expanded foyer space for traffic flow and welcome and all the things, child check-in area, all that be in a big expanded foyer space. We'll still have that entry, but there'll be a new kind of primary entry, actually straight across from those doors right there is where the new entry would be. And then the kind of goldish section is a new children's ministry space that we're building to make up for the years in the trailer. And that's not really it. We're bursting at the seams in our children's ministry, and we're trying to build adequate space to continue to minister to families with children. and to deal with issues of security. This morning it was funny, I met a couple of our, let's say older volunteers trudging up the stairs to our preschool ministry area. And they're like, oh, these stairs are about to kill me. And I said, help us build a new children's ministry wing. We'll get rid of these stairs for you, okay? But security and all of that stuff. And then the purple up there is expanded youth ministry space, middle school, high school. We're going to remodel some of the space that's currently children's ministry space, turn it all into youth ministry space with some additional space for the sake of ministering to as many middle school, high school students as we possibly can. And so that's the short of it. It's a little, just barely under 13,000 square feet. We currently have about 14,500, so we're not quite doubling our space. The front elevation, let's put that picture up there really quickly. The drawing, it'll look something like that. And then we have this 3-minute little virtual fly-through that helps bring this to life. Here's my caution. I've given this 3 weeks in a row. As you watch this, don't marry yourself to the exact color scheme and all those things. We haven't made that decision. This is just to help us see what it could look and feel like. All right, so watch this. kind of look and feel like, all right? Let's talk money. Let's talk turkey, all right? How much? Our projected total cost of the project is $5.5 million. I know, right? So take a big breath through your nose, you know. We have about $620,000 currently in hand. We had more than that. It's money that we've been collecting over the last couple of years, and some money that we've been paying ourselves because we're debt free, and we've been paying ourselves a mortgage payment and building up some money. We actually had more than that, but we've been spending some of it on architectural fees, all that. Our board and finance team has said that we would be willing to carry an indebtedness of up to $1 million, not to exceed $1 million, preferably none, but not to exceed $1 million. And we've been putting ourselves in a position financially with our operating budget to be able to fund that kind of a mortgage payment. Our church board and our pastoral staff, so this is representative of 15 families, 10 church board families and 5 pastoral staff families are in, and have so far pledged $1.2 million toward this project from those 15 families. Another 14 families so far have invested or pledged at least. Some monies have been given, but some pledges totaling $572,000. I can't work in numbers this big. That's not in my checkbook. So $572,600 by another 14 families so far. That leaves a balance of $2,107,400, what we still need to raise from the rest of the congregation. The good news is that we've just heard from a tiny fraction of all the people that belong to Grace Community, the number of families. And I've said this the last 2 weeks, and I'll say it again. This isn't anybody's desire. We hope we don't have to do this, but we do have a plan B. The plan B is if we absolutely cannot get there, that we'll reduce the project by close to $1 million by waiting on the purple part, the youth ministry building, not canceling, but waiting if we just absolutely cannot get there. So what's the challenge? What's the challenge? Overall, we need to double our giving for the next 3 years. And so we're asking as many people who do take us up on this ridiculous challenge, as many people who will, as many people as at all possible, consider doing just that, of doubling our giving for the next 3 years. And of course, we know not everyone can do that. I fully understand. I fully get it. And also know not everyone will do that, although I'm fairly convinced that if we will, God just might be interested in helping us with the can part of that. But I know that not everyone can double their giving, and I get that. And so we're also asking those whom God has blessed with abundant resources at this particular stage of your life to consider doing even more than doubling for these next 3 years. Just giving a gift of outrageous generosity toward this project, spanning from December 23 through the end of December 26, which takes in 4 year ends, if that matters to you in terms of, taxes and all that stuff. I'd invite you to take the pledge card. I think there's one in your bulletin. If not, we've got more. We can hook you up. But I'd invite you to take your pledge card, and if you've been here the last couple of weeks, you've probably already got one of those. And simply do this, all right? Simply do this. Have a serious conversation with Jesus. By the way, the band is coming, so don't let them distract you, okay? That's good news for you, though. That means we're almost done, all right? Can you listen to me for a second? Simply do this. Have a serious conversation with Jesus. And if you're married, have a serious conversation with your spouse, because we'd really like for you to be on the same page. And then, if you would, bring it back by Sunday, November 19th. So two weeks from now. You can bring it before then, but by then, if at all possible, and let us know. And we'll have kind of a commitment Sunday. And I haven't spoken about this, the timing of the project. Some have asked about that. Totally depends on money, when it comes in, how it comes in, if it comes in. But probably the projected would be about this time next year to break ground. And we're not going to wait till we receive it all to break ground by any stretch, but probably about this time next year to break ground, and then it'd probably take us close to a year to do the building project. So that's kind of the projected timing. If everybody just gives all the money all at once, we'll start sooner. So there's that, all right? Just so you'll know, we've been asking God for an outpouring of a spirit of unrestrained generosity from hearts of unrestrained gratitude for the sake of unrestrained mission in our community and in our world. Because if you haven't noticed, our world desperately, desperately needs to know. I'm not talking about know, I'm talking about know. To know and experience the healing love of Jesus. And we want to do everything we can to help make that happen. And we think this project can help us help with that. And that's all this is about. Stand with me, would you?
Thanks for spending a few moments of your time with us today. Our mission, together becoming and inviting others to become authentic followers of Christ. We would love to connect with you. Let us know if you've listened back to the message. Tell us more how we can help you on your journey with Jesus at grace-community.net/connect. And we'll see you next week.